They arrived on a hot July afternoon, the blistering sun pressing down on the cracked pavement like a promise of trouble. The Abdis had driven their old blue sedan into Lakewood Heights, a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of a mid-sized Midwestern city, hopeful that this would be the place to rebuild their lives. Miriam and Yusuf Abdi had emigrated from Somalia 2 years earlier, spending months in a refugee camp and then a year in a crowded city apartment before finding a quiet three-bedroom house for rent on Elm Avenue. Their two children, 8-year-old Amina and 10-year-old Sammy, tumbled out of the car, backpacks slung over freckled shoulders, and ran toward the front porch to inspect their new home's creaky steps and chipped paint. Miriam smiled at them and took Yusuf's hand as they looked across the quiet street, lined with neat lawns and maple trees. At first glance, Lakewood Heights seemed friendly. Well-tended gardens, oscillating sprinkler systems, and houses with names stenciled on mailboxes. But it didn't take long for the subtler signs to appear. On their second morning, while Yusuf unloaded unpacked boxes from the garage, a group of older men gathered across the street, leaning against a battered pickup. One spat on the sidewalk and said, "They don't pay taxes like we do," before shoving the empty beer can back into a crate with a clink. When Miriam took Amina to the local elementary school to register, two mothers rolled their eyes at her as she spoke broken English to the registrar. One whispered loudly to her companion, "You know they'll never fit in. They don't even know how to speak real English." The other nodded and said, "Should have stayed where they belong." Beneath polite smiles and nods, a thin hatred lay coiled like a rattlesnake. Inside their house, for the first week, the Abdis clung to each other. They had fled war, death, and the bitter desert for a fresh start, only to face an unwelcome chill in this new place. Each day brought small cruelty. A neighbor throwing crudely scrawled leaflets under their door. "Neighbors don't want you here," in jagged black letters, while the children played in the yard. Another neighbor called City Hall to complain about the Abdi's border flags and the dry Arabic script on their mailbox that read Abdi Home. When Yusuf replaced it with a simple Abdi family painted in plain block letters, someone carved a swastika into the wood overnight. By the end of the second week, Yusuf was working overtime at a local grocery store while Miriam and the kids huddled inside, too timid to venture beyond the front yard without watching for hostile glances or angry shouts. Sammy rarely smiled, and Amina insisted on doing her homework at the kitchen table while peering anxiously out the window. On a sweltering Saturday afternoon, drugs and liquor-fueled laughter drifting through open windows, Yusuf arrived home late after a contentious shift. The store manager, a stocky man with slicked-back hair, had declined to hire Yusuf full-time when his accent surfaced during training, despite Yusuf's perfect attendance record. Yusuf found Miriam standing on the porch, arms folded, tears glistening on her cheeks. A bottle of yogurt drink teetered on the railing. Amina had dropped it. "They're at it again," Miriam said quietly, her voice trembling. "I saw them in front of Mrs. Baker's house. Mr. and Mrs. Baker came outside with their Labradors. The men across the street yelled at them, too. They said, 'Why are you old white folk helping black terrorists?' Then, they called you a jihadist." Miriam's chin quivered as she tried to swallow her tears. Her hijab clung to her forehead in damp rings where sweat pooled. "I told Amina to stay inside. The kids are too afraid to play with the Johnson boys next door now. They told the Johnsons not to associate with us, or else." Yusuf took a slow breath, tasting the hot air. He knew he must protect his family, but he also saw the stress winding into his wife's forehead, creeping beneath the skin of their children. He enveloped Miriam in his arms, feeling the familiar billow of her grandmother's perfume and the steady warmth of her fear. "We can't keep hiding," he said, voice low. "I promised you a better life. We have a choice. Let them win or do something to change this." He turned toward the shack behind the garage, where they'd begun to store old tarps and broken boards for scrap. "I have an idea." For the coming days, they toiled in the heat. Mission: plan a block-wide festival, showcasing each family's heritage, food, and music. Amina dug up seeds from their pantry, dark lentils, fragrant cumin, and dried chilies, and took cooking lessons from her mother, preparing sambusas for afternoon tastings. Sami sketched invitations with colored pencils, drawing silhouettes of families dancing under lanterns. Yusuf contacted the small Somali grocery, Bright Star Foods, on the edge of town, arranging to borrow foldable tables and plastic chairs. Miriam spent evenings phoning the local mosque, asking if they'd volunteer to teach henna designs, and texting the high school principal, Mrs. Harlan, requesting permission to hang posters in the lobby. The posters read Lakewood Heights Cultural Festival, Food, music, dance. All neighbors welcome. Over the phone, she heard hesitation, but the principal finally agreed, just keep it peaceful and ensure cleanup afterward. At first, Yusuf thought no one would show. They posted invitations under windshield wipers, slipped flyers through mail slots on both sides of the street, and even pinned a laminated poster to the chipped notice board at the small neighborhood grocery. Some passersby eyed them with suspicion, tearing down the flyers. But starting 2 weeks before the festival, neighbors began drifting in. The Johnson family next door, with Mrs. Johnson's soft smile and 2 laughing children, Mr. Baker, whose wife had insisted on helping. They had tasted Miriam's lentil soup once at the shelter and wanted more. Even Mrs. Allen, who had been the first to hand them an anonymous hate letter, stopped by one afternoon, clearing her throat. I, I think my granddaughter would like to learn to paint Arabic letters, she said quietly. Miriam's heart soared as she showed her a practice board and guided her hand in inking slam, peace. Within days, the two women shared tea on the porch, swapping recipes and shy smiles. The sun rose on Festival Day, a sparkling Sunday in mid-September. Tents lined both sides of Elm Avenue, strung with multicolored lanterns that bobbed gently in the breeze. Bright canopies proclaimed Somali kitchen, Mexican street foods, Polish pierogi, and Middle Eastern delights. At Somali kitchen, a long table displayed bowls of fragrant rice, platters of spiced goat stew, and heaps of warm, round bread, called laho. The sizzle of fresh samosas filled the air, the savory scent mingling with paprika from nearby Hungarian paprika meatballs. Maria, a Polish immigrant whose mother had taught her to fold dough into crescent shapes, rolled out dumplings in neat rows, smiling at each passerby and offering a sample with a nod. Tony from Tony's Taco Truck provided free soft tortillas stuffed with marinated beef, bright pico de gallo, and fresh cilantro. He had volunteered his services just to show he believed in unity. A small cluster of teenage girls from the high school spread fresh falafel on pita. Another group taught salsa steps, voices calling uno, dos, tres, cuatro, as hips swayed in the midday sun. In the center of the street, between two towering banners, a raised wooden stage gleamed, decorated with bright pennant flags and flanked by potted geraniums. Polaroid pictures, snapshots of last winter's snowfall, the abandoned soccer ball in the yard, the abandoned swing set, hung from strings overhead as a makeshift gallery of the neighborhood's shared history. As the first noon hour passed, the crowd swelled. Grandparents leaning on canes, toddlers clutching sticky popsicles, college students with cameras slung around their necks. By early afternoon, standing room only spanned the entire block, and then the music began. A low beat of tablas, the gentle hum of a traditional oud. A group of men in embroidered tunics took the stage, launching into a rousing Somali folk song. Amina, perched on her father's shoulders, clapped along, bright eyes shining with pride. Sammy stood at the front, beaming as he held up the banner they had painted together. Unity in diversity. Across the street, Mrs. Allen watched from her front steps, her usual scowl replaced by an awed smile. She raised her phone to record the dancing, the men's call and response verses, the swirling skirts of the neighboring Moroccan women, teaching a group of children to spin like whirling dervishes. The Johnson boys joined in, learning the steps, hesitant at first, before their laughter joined the harmonies echoing under the canopy of branches. Even the men who had spat at the Abdis the previous month watched from the sidewalk, arms folded, but something in the air had shifted. New faces beside theirs, each representing a different homeland, yet united by the simple joy of dancing to a shared rhythm. As the afternoon sun dipped toward the western horizon, the Somali elders prepared to tell stories under the shade of a large oak at the end of the block. Children gathered, sitting cross-legged on patterned blankets, eyes wide as the elders wove tales of desert caravans, moonlit nights on the Indian Ocean, and heroes who had traversed golden sands in search of knowledge. Some young neighbors, once wary and standoffish, crowded in, leaning forward on elbows, entranced by the cadence of the storytellers' voices. In their hands, small notebooks and pens captured the elders' words, the first seeds of understanding being planted in young hearts. When twilight fell, the crowds gathered once more by the stage. A hush spread as the Abdi family walked on in a cluster. Mariam in a bright blue dress embroidered with golden patterns, Yusuf in his best traditional kameez and cap, Amina and Sami resplendent in matching green dashikis. Yusuf took Amina's hand, and she raised her voice high above the crowd to recite a poem in English. We are here, we are one, beneath a single sun, our hearts entwine like root and vine. Together we can rise. The applause thundered, echoing off rooftops and bouncing down the street. Then Miriam stepped forward, her voice steady as she spoke of exile, of the fear that had weighed upon them, of the loneliness that had once closed their doors. But now, she said, their hearts opened wider than any wall could close. She thanked each neighbor for coming, for sharing food, for dancing, for learning a new word, and for opening a space of belonging where there had been only suspicion. Her words landed like soft raindrops on parched land, nourishing a community that had once been brittle and closed. As darkness settled, lanterns lit up like constellations above the street, and the festival slowly wound down. Yet as neighbors hugged, promised to exchange recipes, and lingered to help clear the tables, everyone sensed that the world had shifted. The men who had once spat at Yusuf now lined up at the Somali kitchen table, offering cash in exchange for goat stew. Mrs. Henderson, the Johnsons' elderly widow, confessed she had misjudged them and hoped to attend their Eid gatherings. A sign at the festival's entrance began to read in bold marker, "You belong here." And as the Abdis closed up their remaining containers and stacked chairs, they shared a single glance, one of relief, joy, and quiet pride. They had come to a place where the invitation to belong had once been denied, and through courage and the simple magic of shared culture, they had rewritten the narrative of exile into a story of unity. Under the soft glow of dusk, the family walked home together. The street was quiet now, only the hum of cicadas and distant laughter drifting across lawns. As they stepped onto their front porch, the mother clipped the small "You belong here" sign above their door, a simple banner of inclusion. The children ran inside, trailing new friends behind them, bounding into rooms with sticky fingers, chattering about the henna designs still faintly tinged on their skin. Yusuf unlocked the door and paused, breathing in the cool air, filled with hints of cumin and garlic that lingered on the evening breeze. He wrapped his arm around Miriam's shoulders and said, "Home is wherever we plant kindness." She leaned against him, softly nodding. In that sacred moment, as the first stars blinked awake overhead, Lakewood Heights felt like a patchwork quilt, stitched together by many hands, each square colored by different stories, but all held fast by shared hope. The Abdis had found their place, not by shrinking away, but by standing tall and weaving their culture into the heart of the neighborhood. And in doing so, they had shown that sometimes a simple festival of food, music, and dance can transform "you don't belong" into "we are one." A week after the festival, Elm Avenue looked different. No longer were hateful flyers taped to each doorstep and mailboxes shown with fresh plaques bearing Abdi family in clear block letters, with welcome painted underneath. In front windows across the street, neighbors had placed pots of bright flowers, and children, previously hesitant, now rushed out to invite Amina and Sammy to join them in after-school games. The transformation seemed almost miraculous. By organizing the festival themselves, the Abdis had melted away the neighborhood's indifference, and in places, its simmering hostility. On a sweltering Saturday morning, Sammy stepped out onto the porch to see whether the cookies his mother had baked for the neighborhood tasting club still remained warm. He placed a plate of freshly baked treats on a small folding table and beckoned the first child to arrive, Trevor Johnson, who only used to acknowledge Sammy's existence by nodding awkwardly. Trevor bounded up the front steps, grabbed a cookie, and smiled. "You do this on purpose, don't you? Your mom's baking is even better than store-bought." Sammy nodded and invited the neighborhood kids to invent a new peace cookie, a dough blended with spices and fillings contributed by each child, symbolizing unity. Enthusiasm erupted as they scattered into the yard, gathering cilantro, cinnamon sticks, and even a bit of hot pepper, explaining that everyone should add something of their own to the cookie as a sign of friendship. Meanwhile, Amina received an invitation to join the local summer theater troupe, which staged comedies and folk legends from around the world. She gazed at the announcement poster. Cultural Convergence, Summer Play Sharkan's Journeys, and realized this would be her chance to share her story. The play's protagonist, Sharkan the tiger, travels across lands, learning local customs and helping people understand one another, until he finally finds a place he can call home. During auditions, she recited her monologue on the schoolyard stage. "I am Sharkan, the king of beasts, yet I do not know my home. I have heard people fear me, but I wish to understand them and help them understand me." The audience, children and adults of all backgrounds, greeted her words with warm applause. A week later, she was chosen as the best Sharkan. After the premiere, the music teacher, Mr. Larson, approached her with a proposal to record an improvisational Arabic melody for the show's musical accompaniment. One parent who had been listening to the piano offered, "With that emotion, you could perform professionally." Amina blushed and nodded, pressing her fingertips to adjust the tiger stripes on her costume. While the children threw themselves into the arts, the parents did not rest. Each Sunday, women from all 3 blocks gathered at the Abdi home. Some brought Indian spices, others Mexican seasoning blends, and still others spices from the Maghreb. Mariam and Lelia, Trevor Johnson's wife, once the Abdi's staunchest opponent, compared jars of curry powder, cilantro, paprika, and olive oil infused with mint, preparing small appetizers they called "world on a tongue." Lelia, who had refused to share a table with foreigners only a few months before, now learned from Mariam how to pronounce Arabic names for spices. When she mispronounced kebe, corrected gently as kebe, Mariam reassured her, "Don't worry, Lelia. I mix up my own letters sometimes. The important part is that we're here together, and no one will judge." These weekly cooking sessions lured neighbors who had once been wary. Soon they sat around the long table, celebrating a newfound community spirit. Meanwhile, Yusuf began organizing a street amphitheater of peace in the small grove behind their house. He petitioned through the mayor's office for permission to use a vacant lot so that every 2 weeks they could host concerts and poetry readings. Together with the city's youth council, he brought in lumber to build a low stage and benches, and almost overnight the space came alive. On the first evening, a local rock band arrived with amplifiers. But the highlight came when Somali drummers and Irish fiddlers performed a unique crossover. The drums laid down rhythms typical of coastal Somali songs, and the fiddlers wove in Celtic melodies. The crowd, comprised of children, adults, and elderly neighbors, rapped their hands and tapped their feet, creating a living bridge between the two musical traditions. Even the stray neighborhood cats, drawn by the vibration, prowled near the stage, as though feeling the unspoken unity beneath the beats. After the performance, one onlooker, Mr. O'Reilly, approached Yusuf. "I never thought I'd hear Somali drumming and Irish fiddle played together. That was magic. Thank you for giving us this evening." Yusuf raised his fist in triumph and dragged over a neighbor with a bass drum, suggesting, "Next time, let's combine with Chinese gongs." At the start of October, a true breakthrough occurred. Each block prepared its own cultural pavilion at the citywide fair in the municipal park. The Abdas were responsible for the Somali pavilion. They showcased traditional dances, hosted cooking demonstrations of cinnamon banana treats, and told tales of seafaring scholars who voyaged in search of knowledge. Across from them, the Werner family sold handmade German sausages and cheese delicacies, proudly bringing tins of spices while sampling Somali recipes. Next door, a vegan bakery cafe, previously hesitant to stand beside the outsiders, now offered vegan baklava, folding phyllo pastry layered with honey spun from local beehives, honoring both Mediterranean and Middle Eastern traditions. Children wandered from stall to stall, craning their necks to view a costumed mustard man, a performer dressed as a giant mustard jar, posed for photos with a French crepe master in a tall black beret, and attended a brief workshop on Chinese calligraphy at the Dragon's Den Pavilion. But the longest queue formed before the Somali stall. Everyone wanted to taste sukar, finely diced meat sautéed with onions and spices, followed by sweets offered by little Amina, her grin encouraging all to try. That same weekend, the local paper, the Lakewood Chronicle, ran a full-page spread. Journalist Madeline Thompson reported on how the cultural fair had broken down barriers. The headline read, "Neighbors warned, you don't belong here, but a festival united cultures." Her article quoted Mr. Green, the produce vendor. "I realized I'd never tasted genuine Somali tea," he admitted. "I felt ashamed but grateful." Susan Martin, a longtime resident, wrote, "I discovered that gypsy folk songs can sound as if the very soul is singing." One photo captured the Johnson children, once suspicious of the Abdis, now playing in the sandpit, near the pavilion. By their side was a Somali elder reciting stories. Another photo showed Mrs. Henderson, once among the first to cast resentful looks, hugging a small child from across the world. Madeline included images, the Abdi siblings laughing amid the crowds, an aging couple holding a plate of sambusa, and a group of teenagers forming a human chain, dancing to an improvised mashup of Somali beats and Scottish bagpipes. After the fair, hostility evaporated. Mornings found children, Amina and Sammy included, running to greet Trevor and his sister for afternoon games of soccer or tag. Mrs. Henderson approached Miriam, offering help. "If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know." Miriam's eyes welled with tears as she responded that she would love help tending Mrs. Henderson's rose garden because she enjoyed plants and knew how to care for roses. Every Saturday thereafter, they worked side by side among the blooms, discussing sunlit lands, the art of pruning, and the recipe for carcade tea, which Mrs. Henderson learned was made from hibiscus blossoms harvested in Somalia. She promised to plant 2 hibiscus shrubs in her own garden come spring. Yusuf's next grand idea was a 3-day workshop at the nearby cultural center called World in Your Hands, an Exchange of Crafts. He contacted the director, outlining a program featuring Somali weaving, Mexican pottery, Polish wood carving, and the Chinese tea ceremony. The workshop was scheduled for spring. Yusuf began seeking sponsors, drafting grant applications, and budgeting for materials. Miriam and the children pitched in. Amina translated Arabic instructions into English and helped compile online resources, while Sammy prepared a detailed list of tools needed for a ceramics segment. One evening, gathered around the kitchen table, Miriam opened her laptop. "I spoke with the Cultural Center, and they're thrilled. They'll cover part of the costs." The children's eyes lit up. This was their chance to showcase their cultural heritage on a larger stage. Meanwhile, Mrs. Henderson offered her garage for storing supplies, and Mrs. Kim from the Korean Craft Hub pledged to send several brass tea kettles and ceramic makers so participants could witness the ceremony firsthand. Winter arrived, blanketing the city in snow, and planning for the workshop surged forward. By February, the community buzzed with anticipation for World in Your Hands, a major event uniting artisans from around the district. Local papers ran blurbs proclaiming, "Join us for a unique cultural exchange. Learn Somali weaving techniques. Create Mexican ceramic figures. Try your hand at Polish wood carving. And participate in an authentic Korean tea ritual." The words, cultural exchange, were highlighted in bold, alongside photos of children from the Abdi family smiling during a pottery session and a handwritten note, "Let's learn from each other." In mid-March, the Cultural Center's doors opened under a sky still tinged with the last chill of winter. A brisk morning welcomed a long line of eager attendees, families from nearby blocks, senior visitors from the assisted living center, and art students scouting for inspiration. Across the entrance, Yusuf, Miriam, and their children greeted everyone with beaming faces. Tables draped in brightly colored cloths displayed sliced mangoes spiced with chili, bowls of sweet date-based dessert, and small paper cups of traditional Somali spiced tea. A group of high schoolers from the Makers Club brewed cups of Indian masala chai next to them, encouraging each visitor to savor a sip. Down the hall, Mexican craftsmen set up tables for Talavera pottery, teaching visitors to sculpt small clay figurines and then paint them with intricate floral motifs. Upstairs, Polish woodcarvers unveiled a display of wooden spoons, bowls, and nativity scenes carved from maple and beech, offering hands-on demonstrations of chiseling techniques. In a private side room, Korean masters arranged low tables and bamboo mats, guiding guests through the tea ceremony. First, we warm the teapot. Then we pour water at the edge, honoring the leaf's essence. We sip with gratitude for the quiet moment. Outside, a procession of visitors queued for their turn. By the end of the 3-day workshop, the Cultural Center had become a microcosm of global artistry. Children returned home carrying their own handcrafted pottery, wood carvings, woven bracelets, and empty tea glasses that they planned to fill with milk and sugar to imitate the Korean blend. Parents chatted excitedly about recipes they had learned, promises to host a Korean-style lunch, and plans to install a small pottery wheel in their garage. As the final session closed, the Abdi family led a farewell gathering on the center's sunlit patio. Yusuf spoke into a borrowed microphone. "When we arrived, some thought we didn't belong, but today we have shown that each of us, in our own way, can share something precious from our hearts. Let's continue to learn, cook, carve, and weave together, because unity grows when we embrace our differences." In the weeks that followed, the spirit of World in Your Hands rippled through Lakewood Heights. The storeroom in Mrs. Said Henderson's garage became a mini art supply cabinet stocked with leftover clay, beads, and wood scraps, open to all who wished to create. Saturday mornings brought casual language cafes to local coffee shops, where English speakers learned basic Somali phrases: salam, peace; mahad sanid, thank you, while Somali speakers picked up English idioms like break a leg or hit the books. The Johnsons hosted occasional weekend barbecues featuring sukar alongside grilled bratwurst. The scent of cumin and paprika mingled with sizzling sausages. Neighbors passed down recipes through group emails. Here's how I make my great-grandmother's beef stew. Or, try this for stuffed grape leaves, my grandma taught me. As April rolled in, the city's spring festival planners took note of the Abdi-led events and invited them to host a dedicated cultural showcase during the annual Riverfront Fair. This time, instead of a single street block, they would have a prominent stage and tented area by the riverside, with musicians, cooks, and dancers from every community. The mayor personally congratulated Yusuf on his achievements. You have transformed Lakewood Heights. Your work shows that a neighborhood is not merely where we live, it's what we build together. Miriam, watching her husband receive the official proclamation, felt tears prickle. She thought of the first morning they arrived when strangers had spat at their footsteps. Now they were being celebrated as cultural ambassadors. Summer arrived hot and golden. The Riverfront Fair bustled with life. Children dashing along the waterfront, couples sitting on blankets under willow trees, and the sound of multiple languages blending into a single, welcome chorus. Under the Cultural Showcase banner, Somali drummers opened the event with a series of polyrhythms that had heads nodding. Next, a mariachi band from the Mexican pavilion strummed guitars and trumpets, their lively ballads reverberating through the crowd. The Polish folk dancers whirled their dresses and clinked wooden shoes, while Korean percussionists performed samul nori, the four-drum ensemble that sent ripples through the grass. At the same time, an interactive tent invited visitors to try henna art, pitcher throwing in the Native American tradition, and calligraphy with bamboo pens. In every corner, plates of spiced chicken, tacos, pierogi, and kimchi were passed around. As the day turned to dusk, the final highlight came, a collaborative performance on the main stage. The performers from earlier in the day returned: Somali drummers, Irish fiddlers, Mexican guitarists, Korean percussionists, and Polish accordions, joining forces in a grand finale of music that wove together melodies from each culture. The crowd, thousands strong, rose to their feet, clapping and swaying as the musicians improvised harmonies, blending rhythms until the air itself felt charged with unity. When the last note faded, the applause broke like a tidal wave, spilling over riverfront railings and into the dark waters beyond. Later that week, newspapers and local news channels ran headlines from "You Don't Belong" to "Welcome Home, a Neighborhood Transformed." Interviews with the Abdi family aired on evening news, accompanied by footage of Sammy's and Amina's performances. In the mayor's office, a large frame photo captured the Abdis, standing with neighbors from every block, arms linked and sharing smiles under the festival banner. Underneath, a plaque read, "In honor of those who turned fear into friendship." By autumn, Lakewood Heights had become renowned for its cultural inclusivity. Real estate agents cited the neighborhood's unity as a prime selling point, and city planners frequently brought delegations to study the Abdis festival model. The Elm Avenue house, once marked by hate, now grew a blue sign: Abdi Cultural Center, a small nonprofit foundation offering after-school crafts and language classes. Inside, volunteer tutors taught Arabic, Spanish, Somali, Mandarin, and Polish every weekday. Children who once stared fearfully at the Abdis now nestled on cushions at story hour, listening to folktales from Egypt, India, and Mexico, translating each moral into their own experiences. On the second anniversary of the original Elm Avenue Festival, the Abdi family hosted a Global Harvest Gala in their backyard. A low wooden table held pumpkins carved into lanterns, bowls of spiced lamb stew, samosas, pierogi, tamales, and kimchi pancakes. A long garland of family photos, from those first anxious days to the vibrant festivals, hung overhead beneath the maple tree. In the soft glow of string lights, Yusuf raised a glass of sweet carcade tea. To everyone who once told us we didn't belong, thank you for teaching us resilience. And to all of you who welcomed, learned, and shared, thank you for proving that a single street can become a bridge between cultures. Neighbors rose to their feet, clinking glasses of lemonade, chai, and sommelier bottles of local wine. Amina, now 10, danced barefoot in a Sufi-inspired twirl beside the makeshift stage, her voice meeting the Oud's gentle hum. Sammy, 12, led a group of his friends in a new block-wide soccer game, where teams were numbered by jersey colors tying together different traditions. Red for Somali, green for Mexican, blue for Polish, golden for Korean. Laughter and cheers rose above the yard like a prayer. The older generation, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. O'Reilly, Lelia, and Mr. Foster, stood by a large pot of stew, comparing recipes and swapping stories of how they once could not imagine choosing unity over fear. Among them, Yusuf and Miriam surveyed their neighbors, now friends, united by a vision they had nurtured by refusing to hide. When the first crisp leaves began to fall, a new tradition took root. Each year, on the anniversary of Elm Avenue's first festival, families across Lakewood Heights gathered to share meals, dances, and stories of their ancestral homelands. Under the giant maple that once shaded their dingy porch, neighbors of every background now laid quilts and tables, laden with dishes from every corner of the globe. By lantern light, they sang folk songs in unison, some in Somali, others in Spanish, others in Polish. Children chased glowing paper lanterns along the street, laughing as they tried to catch the flickering lights, just as the Abdi children caught the luminous threads of hope that bound them to all their friends. As the years passed, the Abdis flourished. Yusuf's nonprofit secured grants from the city and philanthropic foundations. By the fifth year, the Elm Avenue Cultural Initiative expanded into a small but thriving community center with its own building, workshops, and regular intercultural events. Miriam penned a recipe book, Flavors of Friendship, featuring Somali, Mexican, Polish, Korean, Indian, and Ukrainian dishes, each accompanied by stories of how the Abdi family discovered and celebrated them with neighbors. Amina, now 15, won a citywide award for her short film documenting Lakewood Heights' transformation, capturing footage from the very first festival to the present, weaving interviews with longtime neighbors and footage of children now grown, fluent in multiple languages. Sammy, 16, designed a mobile app called Neighborly, a digital map that guides newcomers through local cultural events, recipes, and language resources, ensuring that the Abdi family's story would continue to inspire any family arriving uncertain if they would belong. On a crisp November evening, 5 years to the day after they first pulled into the neighborhood, Yusuf and Miriam stood on the porch of their home as the streetlights flickered on. The autumn moon hung low and silver over the rooftops. Their front steps glowed with lanterns shaped like stars, leading guests to a block party where every home joined in the celebration. Children wove around them carrying baskets of candy, while elders exchanged tales by the fire pit set up in the middle of the cul-de-sac. Travelers from nearby towns came to see how a once fractured block had become a beacon of inclusion. The Abdis, hand in hand, watched as their neighbors, first hesitant, then curious, now fully embraced, shared smiles, laughter, and gratitude. Yusuf squeezed Miriam's hand and whispered, "Can you believe how far we've come?" She nodded, and her eyes brimmed with tears of joy. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and in that moment, they knew that no matter where life took them next, home would always be the bridges they had built together. One shared recipe, one shared dance, one shared string of lanterns at a time. In a world that often warns, "You don't belong here," the Abdis showed that by inviting people to the table, by sharing food, music, and language, any community could become a true home for all.